Alright, take two, because I just filmed this entire video with the space heater on. Dante wakes up in Limbo and notices that the distinct suffering from the vestibule is gone, and instead of the tormented screams, he only hears sighs from all around him. He gets up and begins to walk with Virgil, who is explaining Limbo to him. People who died before Christ that would have made it into heaven had they died after Christ. Since they did not die after Christ, they are granted eternal life, where they basically continue to live as they always had, but in limbo. The only punishment that they really are receiving is that there is no hope for them to enter into heaven. Which is really weird because they didn't even do anything wrong, so... Good one, Dante. After Virgil explains what Limbo is, he goes on and tells Dante that, oh yeah, I've been living in Limbo for, you know, a long time, and this one time, I saw a great and mighty one come through hell and leave with a handful of people. This mighty one is Jesus. His name cannot be uttered in hell. It is just not possible. These people being Abel, the second son of Adam and Eve, who was murdered by his older brother Cain. Noah, the character from the Bible who built the ark to save the animals from the flood of Genesis, and we all know this one. Moses, the guy who freed his people from the Pharaoh of Egypt and then took them across the Red Sea to Mount Sinai and received the Ten Commandments from God. Abraham, the Hebrew patriarch for all of the Abrahamic religions. King David, the one that killed Goliath with a stone. Rachel, the mother of Joseph and Benjamin, who went on to become 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel, and a bunch of other important people who I'm not going to include just for the sake of time. Just after Virgil finishes explaining this, the poets are joined by a group of 4 men. These men being Homer, the famous Greek poet, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Dante was a big fan of his works. Horace, Quintus Horatius Flaccus, was the best lyrical poet during the rule of Augustus in Rome. He was friends with Virgil in life. Ovid, Publius Ovidus Naso, was a student of Horace and Virgil, and Lucan. Marcus Annaeus Lucanus was another famous Roman poet who was notable for the speed with which he worked. They all walk around for a while and talk about some, quote, sweet stuff before arriving at a large citadel. Inside the citadel, Dante notices a whole bunch of famous historical figures, including Electra, Hector, Aeneas, Julius Caesar, Camilla, the Queen Amazon, who was most likely Thalestris, the Latian king, who was most likely Aventinus, the son of Hercules and Rhea. He is a character from the Aeneid. Lucrezia, spelled Lucrezia. I could not find a matching historical figure with a name spelled like that, but I think that this was supposed to be Lucretia, who was important in late Roman politics. Julia, Marcia, Cornelia, the Soldan, Socrates, Plato, Democritus, Diogenes, who we will talk about in a second, Thales, Anaxagoras, Zeno, Heraclitus, Empedocles, Orpheus, Tully. I'm not sure who Tully is supposed to be, but I think it is Marcus Tullius Cicero. He was a very famous Roman politician. I have no earthly idea why Dante is referring to a historical figure that he has never met by a nickname, but okay. Linus, again, not sure who Linus is supposed to be, but I think it was supposed to be Pope Linus I. And again, with the nicknames, Dante. Seneca, Euclid, Ptolemy. There were a lot of famous Ptolemies from history, but this one was most likely Claudius Ptolemy. Hippocrates, Galen, Avicenna, and Averroes. This part of the story where Dante just lists off 43 historical figures makes no narrative sense. There is absolutely no way that Dante just recognized all of these people right off the bat. However, from a messaging standpoint, this is pretty interesting, as it pretty clearly communicates who he thought was good enough to go to heaven, being scientists, artists, and rulers, good rulers, or at least rulers that were good by his standards, because he really liked Julius Caesar, and we'll talk about that way later, but keep that in mind. However, the inclusion of some of these people is kind of strange to me, as there's no way that all these people were good enough to go to heaven. Namely, Diogenes, who was a very weird guy. Diogenes is a Greek philosopher from Sinope. He is most famous for his criticality of what were modern-day social conventions, and he often challenged the current teachings. His methods were bizarre. He was a weird man who lived as a slave for a while, and then when he was freed, he was homeless by choice, living in a barrel on the side of a road with only 2 possessions, a bowl and a spoon. And one day, he saw a man drinking water out of his cupped hands and decided he could get rid of the bowl. He often was caught masturbating and defecating in public and could not be convinced to stop. You might know him for his proof against Plato's teachings of what constitutes a human, which at the time was a featherless biped. So Diogenes, being the weird guy he was, plucked a chicken of all of its feathers, walked into Plato's lecture hall, holding it up and announcing, "Behold, a man." Yeah, this is a good point to make because humans are not featherless bipeds. It is still pretty funny nonetheless. There is one more instance that comes to mind of Diogenes just being the weirdest guy ever, which is the time that Julius Caesar himself came to meet Diogenes, and the first thing that Diogenes told him was, "Hey, move, you are standing in my sun." So this guy was really weird, and it is just fascinating that Dante considered that this is a man good enough to go to heaven. I digress. Dante and Virgil bid well to the other four poets and began their descent into the kingdom of eternal night. And we're gonna stop here because my camera is screaming at me. My battery is about to die. So the next video, we're gonna be actually in hell for the first time. So that'll be interesting. Go to the next video. Girl,